We have Vern Lohr, Harvey Lohr, and Bob Kelly, who are longtime, lifelong Spotswood residents and very long members of the fire department, who are going to share memories of how the town was as they grew up here.
Well, the fire department was in an old building, and originally it was a schoolhouse in Spotswood. And when we decided to build a new firehouse, we had to tear the old one down in order to build this one. And everything was done by the firemen, or we had somebody do it, and we paid for it all, not the town.
Yes, no, I've read some of those old minutes. This is what, about 1925, 30, or somewhere in there?
That's the old ones.
Yeah, that was first built when it's about the time they started the hydrant system, right? You could pump the lake water out anywhere in town versus having to drive the truck there.
Yeah, when we built the new firehouse, we had no place to keep our old fire trucks because we had to tear the old one down, as I said. So we kept one fire truck in Bert Shelter's garage, and the other one we kept down in Schweitzer's. So every time there was a fire, it made a pretty hard job in order to, who's going to go to what truck. But we managed to solve the problem.
All right, for newcomers in town, the Shelter's garage is now the transmission place there on the corner of Leet Street. GNS transmission, yes.
We had a few major fires in town. One was the restaurant across the street. Another one, the Methodist Church on Manalapan Road burned down. That happened about 5 o'clock in the morning, and it was pretty cold. And I have to say, we lost the church, but they have a new one built across the street now.
That Methodist Church went back a long way, yes.
Mm-hmm. The one fire I remember is the old community house.
Yeah.
Where right now the public library is. I remember that because I drove the first truck in, and we lost that.
Yeah, behind there was also the beginning of the first aid squad in a little shed behind there.
The first aid squad was not in the community house. It was in the shed, the barn behind the community house.
It's called the carriage house.
Yep, that's where the first aid squad started.
We burnt it down later on in the years as in a fire drill for the department, and it was quite a scene.
Well, this one of those I remember was Mrs. Prine's house on Main Street.
The dress factory.
I mean, what happened? The
Applegate store.
Where it's located.
Oh, that was one that used to be right next door here was Mott's. He used to have Bobby Mott, I think it was Bob.
Yeah.
They had, I can't remember what they were called, but they had a dress factory or shirt factory, whatever it is, a long time ago.
Those are the people that Mott Place is named after?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're right on that now, yes.
And that one on Snow Hill Street was right across from my uncle and aunt's general store. And I used to work in the store during the summer when I was, after I was attending the high school. And mostly all women there because it was all mostly sewing machines. And they used to come in the store, and then for lunch, we'd make up sandwiches for them, and they would take them back, and we'd eat there.
I also worked a summer in my aunt's store, and the Jewish synagogue was on Adirondack Avenue, the first building on the left-hand side. And on Saturday mornings, I'd have to go over and light the candles because they said that they could not do that themselves. But that's where your Jewish synagogue first started.
Yeah.
Now, where was that store located that you worked here at?
Right behind, as you're going out Snow Hill Street, the next building past Art's Body Shop.
It's still, the house still stands there.
Art lived there
It's
for a
got the
while.
porch like on the front, so that was the general store. And they used to, they had a pickup van, and once a week they would go and take orders from the people living in Spotswood. And another day they would go to Old Bridge, down towards where the society place there on the left-hand side, Cosman Street, in that whole area. And we would take the orders and then bring them back fill them, and deliver them right back to their houses.
Because there are two other stores in town. We're trying to locate the location, and the United Bargain Stores and American Stores. Do you have any recollection where they might
American
be
Store was
located?
located on the corner of Main Street and DeVoe Avenue. And after it was the American Store, Laird's took it over, and it was something similar to a 5 and 10. And then the other half of the store, Laird's ran an ice cream parlor. And after they had the ice cream parlor, they gave that up. Ellingham's took it over. And after they gave it up, a person by the name of Dagan, Pop Dagan, and his wife ran the candy store. And one time, Pop Dagan painted the whole store inside. And he had a paint can in the middle of the floor with the paintbrushes in. And somebody said something about it, watch out, you don't have a fire. And Pop Dagan says, you can light a match and throw it right in there and it will never go up. And somebody said something else to him, and Pop said, you can't dare a Deegan. So he lit a match, and he threw it in, and the whole thing went up. And it didn't burn the building down, but Pop Deegan had to paint the whole store all over again, so it all turned black.
But there's a rumor that there was an original first A&P was in Spotswood. Any memory of that? Of
I think the
A&P?
American Store was like a subsidiary of that, you know.
And where was that which store located?
That was
That was
right
what we just
same,
talking about,
okay,
yeah.
same.
Right on the corner.
Old
where
Smitty.
Hewitt's now is now.
Well, that was the American store. What about the United Bargain Stores?
That I don't remember.
No memory of
I
that?
don't
Okay.
remember that. There was where in town here, where Bill Hunt Building is, there was at one time, there was a children's store in one half of the front, and it was a sporting goods store in the other half. But they have long since gone.
Yeah, it was run by Mr. Kless, the children's store.
Kless was the
I
silver store.
used to go buy clothes there when I was a kid, yes.
And where your parents' funeral parlor is, alongside of it, there were two stores. One was, what was the name of the people that owned the place?
Herenowitz.
What?
Herenowitz.
No,
No.
that was next to the firehouse.
That was next.
Oh, yeah, his store was, but he actually owned the property where I lived there for a while.
Yeah,
That's the house behind it.
Yeah, right.
That's the house behind it.
The people that owned with the funeral parlor, they were a Jewish couple.
Rosen something,
I
yeah.
don't know, but anyway, that store, he had a hardware store in one half, and John Kumka, he had a butcher shop in the other half. That's right where in front of where the telephone company is now, and behind it, that building was the First Catholic Church.
Right.
Yeah, that was pretty far back where
Way back.
the apartments are now, yes.
That building in the front that he's talking about, I remember there used to be a barber shop in there too.
Yeah.
I can't remember the man's name, Ed.
Charlie, wasn't it?
Ed, something like that. Used to be a hobby shop in there, you know, at one time. You know.
That's a little before I remember.
Yeah.
That was the Catholic Church parish house about there, right?
Yeah.
When I was young, right? And then it became the phone company.
Right.
That's what it still is, yes. The oldest business we've actually been able to trace in town is, I think, Applegate's, or I don't forget who owns it now, the florist. John Applegate started selling flowers out of his house, I heard, in 1939, so
Yeah.
that's a long time ago, obviously, 70s.
He planted his flowers up on Brunswick Avenue. And one of his relatives owned the land there, and he planted all his flowers. That's where he got to start out.
That's where Diane lives now.
Wallace.
Wallace Applegate.
Wallace was the owner of the florist.
Right.
Oh, yeah, no, that was his father, right?
Yeah, Johnny
Yeah.
took over later on.
Yeah.
No, I have Wallace Applegate signed my Sparky the Fire Dog Club card. I still got it.
And another thing you might have forgot about was the Spotswood Hotel. There was a little building out in front of that, and it was Cavolius' barber shop. And after he went out of business, Walter Scotty Edwards had a fish store in there.
I think my mother used to call it John's Barber Shop. That the same thing?
Yeah, John.
Yeah. I guess she couldn't pronounce his last name or whatever. I used to go there.
John Cavolius. That's
Cavolius.
John Tavolius, yeah.
Okay, and
He lived
then
on Madison Avenue.
And then on Snow Hill Street, I don't know if you remember, there was a barber shop. His name was,
Carmen.
Carmen.
Carmen and Gus,
Barberari.
right, yeah.
and when he had nothing to do in a barber shop, he'd go down to the brook, and there was some small fish there, and he'd catch those fish. And one day, Vince Woodmansey, who was the chief of police, went in to get a haircut, and he wasn't in the shop, so he walked down the back to the brook, and he found Barberi laying along the bank. He was dead. He had a heart attack. And Woodmansey took everything out of his pocket to give to his widow, and he had a Prince Albert tobacco can in his pocket. And when Vince looked in there, the guy had all his money stored in there. So Vince says he thought he was rich for a minute.
Yeah, people didn't trust banks in those days, huh? No, I remember sitting in that barbershop having men arguing about the Vietnam War. I think Richie Lore is one of your sons, right?
Richie was my brother's boy.
Yeah, I remember him having a good discussion about with Gus the barber about the Vietnam War. I can't remember who was pro and who was against, but that was a hot topic in those days. Let's see, what other businesses do we... Junkyards in town, that's an interesting subject.
Jake Brown's junkyard was on Manalapan Road, and that's where there's a store or something in there now, and he had the back half, and right in front of that junkyard, there was a little building, was the ice house, and all the people from the Spotswood got their ice for the refrigerators, for their ice boxes, but refrigerators were just starting to come in then.
No, ice was a reality of life, yes. Another thing I haven't been able to talk to anybody about, you remember the buses that used to come through town, a little school bus that sold food and things to people?
Yeah,
I can't remember who ran it, but...
the guy was from Old Bridge. Yeah. I remember he used to come around with that school bus with the food. He even went to Monroe Township. As a matter of fact, my wife bought from him several times, so it was a long time ago.
Yeah, I remember it was in the 60s, obviously, when I remember it, and Mrs. Gale and Mr. Applegate, who lived on Main Street there, a couple of doors up from what's not a post office, used to...
Florence.
What's the name?
Oh, Betsy.
Yeah, right.
Betsy, yeah.
They bought stuff off of that truck all the time. I mean, by that point, we were going over to 18 and buying it at supermarkets, but, you know, the older people, I guess, stuck to the way they used to do it.
I can remember during the Second World War, used to be a guy came through. Sometimes he had a horse and buggy, and sometimes he had an old truck with cowbells on. And he was collecting tin cans and rags and whatever else for the war effort, you know. That was quite a thing.
Yeah, we've done a lot of research on the minutes of the council meetings here, and they actually, at one point, the town of Spotswood bought a war bond. You think about today, all they want is the money coming in from the federal government.
Yeah.
Here, we actually gave them some. I mean, it was amazing. And then a couple years later, one of the wives of the councilman actually lent the town $5,000. I forget the name, but you imagine anybody doing that today? We couldn't find any record anybody ever paid it back.
Well, taxes have sure gone up in the borough over the years. When I bought my house, I paid $48 a year of taxes. Now I pay $5,500.
Yeah, we had one like that on my street. Ernie Jacobs, who just died a couple of years ago, he bought his house, he told me, for $7,000 in 1948.
So it's what I paid for mine in
$47,000, yeah.
$47,000. But I did a lot to it since then.
No, a lot of people out over there on the
But at the same token, when I got out of the service, went to work for Hercules. I got 52 cents an hour. And I stayed with them for 29 years, and then I went to school nights and worked in the water department. I ended up director of public works here in the borough of Spotswood.
Yeah, I went to work for DuPont, and we got 75 cents an hour. We thought that was big money. In those days, it was.
When the dollar was worth something, yeah. No,
That's right.
No inflation in those days, right?
Gasoline, we what, 13 cents a gallon, something like that. Big difference.
I can tell you one little funny story about us when we were young. We bought a car, a Model T Ford. We bought it from Mellingham's. We paid $25 for it. And we were to pay $5 a month payments. And there were 5 of us that were involved. And my brother Bucky, John, he was the driver, and Jimmy Logan was the mechanic. And we made 4 payments of the $5. When the 5th one came up, the 5 guys that were in the group, we couldn't come up with the other $5, and he took the car away from us.
Life was harsh in those days. Harvey, we talked to you a couple years ago. We were writing the book. You had a story about going up in the steeple in St. Peter's.
Years? Well, I'll back up a little bit. I'll tell you a little bit about that area. My brother John, as Bucky, and Ed Schellenberger were swimming behind the Episcopal Church. And at that time, you had to have a top on your bathing suit, and they only went in with the bottoms. And they both got arrested. And when it came up to court, Mr. Latour was the judge, and he had so many people out there complaining about the arresting the two people in Spotswood that he dismissed the case and they changed the ordinance. It was after that, they no longer had to wear a top to their bathing suit. But getting back to the church, I don't know if it was Halloween or very close to it. I'm not even going to mention who did it, but somebody crawled up in the church and they tied a fishing line to the clapper of the church bell, and they ran it out the church and across the brook and they start ringing the church bell. Well, after they rang it so long, the town had to do something about it, so they sent one of their specials, which what was Harvey Yule's brother's father-in-law's name?
Sinstack.
Sinstack
Charlie
was the cop.
Sinstack.
And he went over and he's hollering up to the church people. He's, "Come on down, I know you're up there, come on down." Well, when nobody come down, he hollered, "If you don't come down, I'm gonna shoot." But the guys were across the brook having a good time.
Yeah, we don't get those good stories anymore in Spotswood. Most Beaver's working on one here.
And another thing that before I joined the fire company, the boys at Halloween, they have something to do. Down here by the Summer Hill Road, they put a big pile of corn stalks in the middle of the road, and they lit them off. And while the fire truck was down there putting them out, the other group was lighting them off up on Manalapan Road. So we had, something to liven up the town a little bit on Halloween.
Yeah, kids complain today there's nothing to do.
We made the things to do.
That's right.
Well, we had a ball field behind the school, the town, and we paid that for that whole thing ourselves. The town didn't have nothing to do with it, and we used to take care of the grounds and stuff. And we had a guy come over and cut the grass with his horse and wagon. Lomans from Brunswick Avenue.
He had his horse.
And finally, the town gave us $500 a donation, and we built up the bleachers in there. But outside of that, if you wanted to have any recreations in town, you had to do it yourself.
That field is where Appleby is now.
That's why baseball was so popular in town.
Baseball's a great sport still, as far as I'm concerned, yes.
Yeah.
It's, that Roy Dye told us stories about playing Little League there in that field before they built the one up in Clover Estates.
And when we had a ball game, in order to get the money to pay for the bats and balls and stuff, they used to take up a collection. And Pop Dagan used to go around the stands, and he would get a few dollars there, but most of the time he went in a hotel with the guys at the bar. He did much better there. But Doc Hewlin, every time we had a ball game, he gave us $5.
Well, he was right next to the field there, right?
Right
Yeah.
up the field.
And he treated us too.
Yeah. Brought his
John-
medical kit then.
John Applegate was playing left field, and I was pitching this game, and this fella hit a high fly ball in left field. Well, I turned around, I figured that's a short out. All of a sudden, I heard the people roar. I turned around, John was down on his knees. He lost the sight of the ball, come down, broke his nose. Doc Hewlin sitting out on his back porch, bring him over. He took care of him. Next Sunday, we had another game. I was pitching, and Johnny Applegate was out in left field. Same thing, the ball went up, come down, hit him again, broke his nose again. Doc Hewlin sitting there, bring him in. There was no charge either. I mean, that was the things that happened. I mean, unbelievable. The guy got a broken nose 2 weeks in a row on the same pitch, more or less. I just turned my back and shook my head, that's all. What can I do?
throw him outside so they hit the right field.
Yeah.
The one thing I remember about their ball club, one day they had an exhibition game with a team from New York Fire Department. And I was only a kid then, But anyway, it used to have coal trains come through the town all the time. And this one guy from New York, he gets up, he's left-hander, and he hits the ball. Meanwhile, this train is going by, and the ball lands on the pile of coal on one of the cars, Then you see the train go, and there goes the ball, That was the longest home run I ever saw.
And Appleby School wasn't there at that time either. There was no school, so you had plenty of room. I mean, you weren't confined any section or anything.
And getting back to the Kelly's story about the fire department, every summer our fire company would have a fire company from Newark come down for the day, and we'd supply all the food, and we'd play a ball game with them. And then after that, we'd send a couple of guys to Newark, and they would ride on the fire truck and go to the fires. But the Newark firemen, when they brought their whole families down, they couldn't get over it that somebody would invite a whole fire company down and feed them and give them entertainment for the whole day.
Oh, yeah, food stores in town. I guess we covered a little of that, but let's see, you've got one here called Meat Supply, number 43.
Well, there was a meat supply that's called Syrups, and that was at Kosciuszko Street. There was a house on the building on one corner, and then the other corner had a grocery store, and that was run by Syrup's sister. But in the back is where they had their shop, and the two brothers, they went around to all the stores and houses and stuff and brought the meat.
Yeah, I think we have a picture of a delivery truck in our book. And in fact, the property I live on, I can throw a baseball out my bedroom window and hit that building. Yeah, that one I know about, yes.
And two, there was no supermarkets in town or anything like that in those days. Because if you wanted to go to a bigger store, you had to go to New Brunswick. And the stores were only open on Thursday nights. So you had to get there, get what you had to get, and then take off. Because they closed the store at 9 o'clock, and that was it. It was only one day a week that you could do this. But then they had the different ordinances, and then they were staying open longer.
Yeah, the first mall was Mid-State Mall, what about the early 60s maybe?
Yeah.
You could go over and shop on Route 18 as opposed to going all the way into New Brunswick. Yeah, we've lost stores here over the years that have moved up to the highway, right? You got to be doing business better than in Spotswood.
Bert, you had told Gary Castellano about a story when you were swimming behind Schweitzer's. You had seen a plane crash. You want to?
Pardon?
You were swimming at one time behind Schweitzer's, and you had told Gary, and you had seen a plane crash.
Oh, that was up on the hill there, the plane that came down, behind the Lutheran church.
Yeah.
Oh, it was over there. Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, there were
I
actually,
forget who that was.
that was, I'll think in a few minutes. That was actually two. There was one there, and then there was one on Old Bridge Englishtown Road. Something happened to the plane. They came down, and the plane was about 6 feet down on the ground. It had come down
Well,
so
that
hard.
was Yule.
The Yule's up
Johnny
here.
Yule was
Up
the
here.
pilot, yeah.
Yeah.
And we were swimming over there behind Schweitzer's. And the Two-Hernal Lake wasn't there at that time. It was just the main stream coming down, it separated, and then came back on. You had an island. And we were swimming, and we were watching the Yule plane. He was doing all kind of different things, and he wanted to do like a backflip. And the one wing came off, and he just straight down in the ground. Both of them were killed. Johnny Yule and relation to Harvey Yule, and he had a little garage on the corner of Summer Hill in Old Stage. And he had a fellow named Van Dyke with him. He was taking him up to show him what he could do. And the one wing came, we saw it. It was coming over and down it went. And like I say, it was straight down. Both of them were killed right instantly. It was nothing they could do for him. Because the engine and everything went way deep into the ground. And it was quite something to see that happen.
Yeah, we got the picture here. It's sort of a World War I style biplane, right? With all the guy wires holding the top and the bottom wing together.
Right.
And yeah, it was September 5th, 1931. Mm-hmm. And Herbert Van Dyke was his name.
Yeah.
All right. Now that's very interesting that you actually witnessed that firsthand. That's
Yeah, we were swimming there as kids in one of those ponds in the back of. Well, then the plant it wasn't really operating. I don't believe at that time, because it was known when it was built as the Salpa plant, SALPA. It was an Italian concern, and they used to make artificial leather, but they went out of business, and then for a number of years it just sat there, nothing was done. And till later on, the Schweitzers took it over and started making paper, things like that.